This is the time I had a racist Uber driver. So for my birthday this year, we decided to go to Cheesecake Factory and walk around the mall after we drank. It was me, my boyfriend, and his two friends, who are also my friends. Obviously, we couldn't drive there if we were drinking, so we called an Uber driver. The first Uber driver was nice. He was cool. Then the Uber driver that picked us up from the Cheesecake Factory, different story. Right off the bat, he looked like a clown. He pulls up in what looks like a white 1998 Honda Odyssey minivan. If you're curious, just look up what that looks like on Google Images. And he had all these stickers on it. Taxi stickers, obviously the Uber sticker, Lyft sticker, Trump stickers. And when we get in the minivan, he's wearing a legit top hat. Like when you see a chauffeur wear a top hat in the movies, and a striped white and black outfit. He had an Alexa plugged into his car, and he put post-it notes up that say, in quotes, "Say Alexa play." So then my friend was like, "Hey Alexa, play Pop Smoke." I'm sorry, I really needed to give you this backstory, but like for part 2. This is the time I had a racist Uber driver part 2. So we were all bumping to Pop Smoke, and we were all teed, so we decided to mess with him. We started asking him random questions, like, oh, how do you like driving as an Uber driver? Or what's your craziest experience with Uber? So we get to chit-chatting, and then my friend Mike decides to like pretend that he was a drug dealer, and starts bragging that he bought a brand new 2020 Audi with his dealer money, which he didn't, and he's not a dealer. And the guy's like, yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of drug dealers. And we were like, how did you know? Like, what happened? And he was like, I've picked up my fair share of black people. And I was like, excuse me, sir, what? What did he say? But not for real, I was tight. I was like, excuse me, what? And I was like, so, like, what, how? And mind you, I was like teed. And when I'm teed, I kind of just say what's on my mind. And I was like, so you think every black person is a drug dealer? And he was like, pretty much. So when he goes to drop us off, I poured out my leftover fettuccine alfredo in his car and screamed he was a racist piece of shit. This is my tattoo horror story. So this was for my 19th birthday, I believe. I really wanted like a tiny little crown tattoo on the back of my neck. I saw it on Pinterest and I was like, I need this tattoo. I need it right now. So I messaged my normal tattoo guy and he was already booked for like the next few days, and like I said, I wanted it right then and there, which was a very big mistake looking back at it. And it was a Sunday, so not many tattoo shops were even open in the first place, except for one. I wish I could just out this place. It is literally the most horrible place run by the most horrible people. But anyway, I go in. He told me that he could do it, but it has to be bigger because he can't do something that small. Which I've seen tattoo artists do tiny little tattoos, so that was the first red flag. But I was being impulsive and stubborn and I really wanted that tattoo right then and there, so I said okay. He put the stencil on me and it looked small, it looked good. After having him tattoo my neck for over an hour and a half, I started to get worried. Part 2 of my tattoo horror story. So I was in the tattoo shop for about 2.5 hours. This wasn't because he was tattooing me for 2 hours, but because he kept on taking short breaks. He kept on telling me that he had to take a smoke break. And I was like, okay, that's fine, do what you gotta do. It was only him and another guy working there, nobody else. And every time he would take a smoke break, him and his coworker would go outside. During like the 3rd smoke break that they had, I had to pee, so I went to the bathroom. And when you're coming out of the bathroom, you're able to see outside, like through the window. So I noticed that the guy that was giving me my tattoo had a pill bottle in his hand. I kind of figured it was like Tylenol or something. But he was pouring it into his coworker's hand and he looked mad sus. So I go back and I wait in the room, sitting in the chair. Mind you, my friend was with me. And they took another 10-15 minutes to come back. And the way that I was sitting, my head was kind of like leaning down. So every time he would come back, the door was behind me, so I didn't really have to look at his face. And keep in mind that this was the longest break that he took the whole time. So after we left, my friend told me that time that he came back, he had white powder all in his nose and he was trying to wipe it off. And my tattoo got infected.
Ever had just little random things go missing from your house? It happens a lot and you just don't really think anything of it. But what if those things started to show up at your doorstep? That is exactly what my stalker did to me. So as all scary stories start, I met a guy on Tinder. And for the sake of the story, I feel like his name should be Ted. So Ted and I really hit it off and dated for 3 months, and that's when he asked me to be his girlfriend. I of course said yes, but that's when I saw a switch in his personality. He became this very dark, controlling figure in my life and kept me from seeing any of my friends and family. Once I realized this was emotional abuse, I left. And he was eerily calm about the breakup, which was not consistent with his controlling behavior. And around this time, I started to get anonymous packages delivered to my house. And they contained stuff that had been missing from my home. I tried to brush it off, but couldn't help but think it might be Ted. But that's when I got a text from Ted's best friend saying that Ted had passed away in a car crash. So I ruled him out, but that's when more weird things kept happening. The anonymous packages kept showing up, and then I noticed a car would follow me everywhere I went. Storytime part 2 to my stalker sending me missing items from my house. After I got the text message that my ex had passed away in a car crash, I immediately ruled him out. Like, there's no way you can be dead and sending me packages. And then I started to notice anytime I would leave my house to go run errands, this one car was always there. They would always follow close or park next to me. And sometimes I would even think that I could see Ted, but I thought I was just imagining it because I was dealing with his loss. But then I started to get texts from a random number, giving me information about where I lived, what I was doing. So I obviously blocked it. And then hundreds of new numbers would start to text me, and I couldn't keep blocking them all. So I finally talked to my mom about it, and she made me go to the police. That's when the officers tracked one of the numbers back to Ted's house, which really confused me because I had already grieved his loss. But the officers let me know that he was very much alive, and they went to go arrest him and found him in my neighborhood in the car that I had seen following me, which was stolen and had photos of me all over it.
When I was in 5th grade, I had a friend who brought the Ouija board to school. I then went home and told my mom about it and told her that I wanted one. She said, absolutely not, we're not gonna mess around with that. Me being naive and just like young, didn't really take her warning seriously. My way of thinking was, if it was something that was really bad, they wouldn't sell it at a toy store. To me, it was just a board game. That day after school, one of my friends came home with me and she drew it out on a piece of paper and we started asking it questions using a pencil. Please don't try this at home. I started answering back. Then out of nowhere, I got this like uncontrollable laughter that I couldn't control. Like I couldn't stop myself from laughing. So we stopped playing the game. Put it away, didn't think about it. That night in my room, I got woken up to like several different voices calling my name. My room was pitch black. Honestly, the only thing that saved me was the fact that I had this Jesus statue right next to my bed and I held on to it. We ended up having to call the priest the next day to bless the house. As he's blessing the living room, all you hear is doors being slammed up. Okay, so part 2. The priest ended up leaving because he became so physically ill about whatever was in the house. I of course wasn't gonna sleep by myself this time. I was even more terrified. My mom ended up sleeping in the room with me. She had like a pull-out bed right next to where my bed was. That night, I of course felt it again and it was even more angry. My mom said that she didn't want to frighten me, but the tension was so strong in that room that she felt that whatever it was wanted to physically drag her out of the room so I could be in there alone with it. Apparently, I wasn't the only one having issues. My mom called my friend's mom and told her what was going on, and she said that my friend was also going through the same thing. So whoever we allowed in was bad. We called the priest again. He showed up with 3 other priests, and they went through the whole house and blessed it. Things slowed down for a little bit, but I truly believe that whatever we invited that day remained in that house. This was the haunted house I grew up in. So I guess he just made himself at home with the rest of them.
This is how a fortune teller saved my life. One night after work, my friend Abby and I decided to go out and grab a drink. On the way, Abby noticed a little hole in the wall business that had a sign out front that said psychic readings. Abby's always doing spontaneous and super random things, so of course she pulled over as soon as she saw it and insisted that we go in. I was apprehensive at first, but she talked me into it. I never believed in this sort of thing, but I figured I'd go in to make Abby happy. As we walked in, we were greeted by a very old woman that reeked of cheap perfume. She brought us to the back room where I noticed 3 or 4 cats lounging about. She read Abby's palm first and told her a super generic fortune that sounded like she got it off of Google daily horoscopes. I couldn't help but to scoff. When it was my turn, she grabbed my hand and began reading my palm. She seemed to be taking forever with my reading. Then she looked up at me with a worried look, gripped my hand so hard that it hurt, and said, "You will receive something that doesn't belong to you in the coming months. It will be wet. Stay at a friend or family member's house that day, dear." I gave her a strange look and we left and went on with our night. Little did I know this piece of information would end up saving my life. Part 2 of how a fortune teller saved my life. Months went by since I saw the fortune teller. I never gave what she said a second thought. One morning I woke up and went to go check the mail. There was a package on my doorstep, but I hadn't ordered anything recently. There was a bad storm that day, and the package was soaked. After taking it inside, I noticed that the package wasn't mine and it had been delivered to the wrong address. This is when it clicked in my head, and I remembered what the crazy old fortune teller lady had told me. I'll receive something that isn't mine, it'll be wet, stay at a friend's house that night. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little freaked out. I thought to myself it was probably a coincidence and that packages get delivered to the wrong address all the time. But what she said stayed in the back of my mind all day. I decided to stay at my sister's house that night just to be safe. I went over to her house in the storm and we had a much needed girls' night. The next morning I went home and I was shocked. Sometime last night during the storm, the large tree in my front yard had fallen on my house right on top of my bedroom. It completely broke through the roof, destroying my room and the hall. I got back in my car and drove to the fortune teller's business to thank her. When I got there, her business had been closed down and she was nowhere to be found. To this day, I still believe that her warning saved my life.
36-year-old man poured acid on this 12-year-old's face after she rejected him. Part 1. Sorry for the wait. Lakshmi Agarwal was born to a poor family in New Delhi, India. She lived in a small house and her father worked really hard to make ends meet. To help her family, Lakshmi also worked at a bookstore after school. One day, while working at the bookstore, she got a text from an old family friend. The text read, "Lakshmi, I love you and I want to marry you." Embarrassed and uncomfortable, Lakshmi replied she would never marry him. But later that night, the man texted her back saying, "Lakshmi, you need to marry me if you want to have a good life and make your parents proud." She replied, "No, you're wrong," and never got a reply back. The next morning, she was on her way to school when she saw him with a couple of his friends. Wanting to avoid him, she quickly started walking away from them. Suddenly, one of his friends grabbed her and pushed her to the ground. Lakshmi tried running away, but they pinned her down and pulled out. This 36-year-old man poured acid on this 12-year-old's face after she rejected him. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. The man then started pouring acid over her as she screamed in pain. Lakshmi felt like she was in a horrifying nightmare as she slowly passed out. She woke up hours later in the same spot with agonizing pain, feeling like her whole body was on fire. She was about to pass out again when luckily a woman saw her and ran to her aid. Lakshmi was immediately rushed to the hospital in very critical condition. The doctors told her parents she wouldn't survive, but miraculously, after a week of fighting for her life, she began to recover. Lakshmi didn't allow this horrible incident to ruin her life and instead used it as an example to fight against acid attacks. Now, she's a motivational speaker and social activist promoting women's empowerment. Lakshmi is also advocating for the complete banning of acid and even had a TED Talk to spread awareness about acid attacks.
Face in your face.